And so we will welcome people to this conversation and welcome those who have joined us for others back to this conversation, and excited to be talking with Dr. Michelle Murray this morning. For those who have not joined us previously, I'm Katie Treadwell. I serve as Director of Student Conduct and Community Standards at the University of Kansas, and also chair NASPA's Campus Safety and Violence Prevention Knowledge Community. And Dr. Murray, I'll ask you to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Katie. And I'm Michelle Murray. I serve as Vice President for Student Affairs and Dean of Students at the College of Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts.
Great. And Michelle, I am excited to connect with you, and I know others will be excited to hear from you. We actually met at a NASPA Institute about 3 years ago now, I think, and just am excited to hear a little bit about your work lately. And again, these conversations are meant to give broad perspectives on what campus safety and violence prevention looks like right now. And so I think the million-dollar question that's on everyone's minds is, what has your life looked like in the past 15 months, and what is the current state of your life and work?
Well, that's funny. You know, Katie, my life has looked probably much like everybody else's, and it has been on what I would call hyperdrive. You know, working 7 days a week and many, many hours because the idea of campus health, safety, and prevention work, you know, it took a different turn the beginning of March of 2020, right? You know, and everything changed. And we were, as a campus, we were coming right off of, it was just after a tragic accident involving one of our sports teams that had happened in January. And so we entered this pandemic already in somewhat of a state of crisis at the institution. And it has been nonstop since, although I can say that right now, you know, things seem to be settling out for a more normal kind of a pace. But even in the pandemic, you know, those things, the things of the regular kind of beat of campus life didn't change. Mm-hmm. So still dealing with bias incidents. And once we went on Zoom, you know, they took a different turn, and working with Zoom bombing and all of the rest of that. So that was a different kind of thing. You know, certainly as we're talking about safety and prevention, the ways in which people were using their social media accounts to mistreat one another, you know, that was its own thing, and including, you know, threat assessment work, all of the above. You know, the rhythms of campus life did not end when the pandemic happened. So it's been a bit of a doozy.
So I'm curious, and I've certainly experienced all of those kind of normal campus activities, even though we're in a virtual space. I'm curious, as someone in your position, in a vice president position, knowing that everything is different and all of those things continue, how have you supported your staff and your team as they are navigating some of those pieces?
Yeah, that's you know, one of the main things that I will share with my staff, right, is work is only one part of our life, and we have to have some level of balance and some or integration. Work-life integration is how I like to say it, because there's never really, you know, we never really reach that equilibrium. And you know, I want people to take time off. I want people to take time for themselves. And I think my staff is experiencing exactly what I'm experiencing, which is this mountain of responsibility And so people are just now in the space where they feel like they can take some time. It's hard. And I was thinking back, usually, right at the end of the semester, fall semester, before we get into winter or spring semester, there's a good long break. But we instituted a January term to accommodate students who really could only do 3 classes online. And so then they had an opportunity in January to take their 4th class. But that meant that we had no break in between the semesters. So people have been running full throttle, really actually since January 15th, which is when the accident happened. Um, so for a year and a half, full throttle. And my saying you need to take a break has about as much effect as someone saying to me, you need to take a break, right? Right. I recognize, yes, that's absolutely true. I do need to take a break. And if I take this time, this work is not going away. And it's whether I want the stress to be, you can't see my hands maybe, but spread out evenly over a long period of time, or I want a quick stopgap and then come right back into it. At a heftier pace. So, it's having said all of that, I'm a big believer in quiet time. I'm a big believer in having that space for prayer or meditation or journaling or reflection or whatever it is that centers. Um, a more routine exercise came into my life. And over the past year and a half, and I think that's true for a number of colleagues, just you got to deal with the stress in some kind of a way that's healthy.
You shared about the accident in January of 2020, and certainly I think a lot of people were aware of that, and then quickly moving into a pandemic space and a pandemic response. And so you all, to some extent, have been dealing with something for more than a year and a half. What does it look like to start a new semester, think about, as you mentioned, recentering a little bit, and how you look forward to the fall semester?
So yes, very good question. Well, so we also happen to be in the middle of a presidential transition, and we are doing, we're in our strategic planning. So our previous strategic plan ended 2020, and now we're in that space of kind of imagining. So all of this is coming together so nicely. It's kind of serendipitous that we have new possibilities opening up in terms of strategic planning, new leadership, and then also the world, or at least our part of the world here in Massachusetts, where vaccination rates are pretty high. We can start imagining life not back to normal, because I think there's no going back, right? There's never really going backwards. It's just going to be, what is the next normal, but a greater degree of freedom and interaction. And for an institution like ours that has community at its foundation, where these interpersonal interactions are so foundational to who we are, it's been really difficult to be separated from folks and to be only on screen with people. And so we find ourselves at a space of renewal on multiple levels. And that to me is kind of energizing. It's really at this point about possibility, and also I think taking from our own history and the lessons of we're a Jesuit campus, and so taking lessons from the founders of the Jesuits and sort of their spiritual guidance, I guess is what I would say. There are things to learn from this collective hardship or collective trauma even. And there are ways that rather than hurrying back to the familiar, that we can pause. There's an invitation here to pause and say, what is this time teach us about how we want to move forward in life? So I don't, I think the strategic plan actually gives us that opportunity as an institution. And then the reminders for folks to do that as individuals too, but that we have that kind of pause as an institution, I think is a real gift.
I really appreciate the way you framed that idea of collective trauma and that invitation to pause. And I think that will resonate with a lot of people. And I think a lot of people both are challenged by and maybe inspired to find a little bit of that space to pause, whether it's individually or at a broader level. As you've thought about a new semester and maybe not a return to normal, but a post-pandemic or a new normal, are there particular safety or violence prevention issues or topics that are relevant for your campus or on your mind? You mentioned bias incidents and threat assessment. I'm curious sort of what's the vibe on your campus with that work right now?
Yeah, good question. I think it's really important to say, right, that we're living through the pandemic. Hopefully we're more or less on the other side of it, the COVID pandemic. But then the other thing that happened in the past year is kind of this general awakening to the reality of, inequitable systems. And, first brought about, I think in a broader way, by George Floyd's killing, his murder on a public street, by people who are sworn to protect and serve. So we're also, I think, dealing with that as a campus, and the fact that that for reasons that I think are probably too complex to go into at the time that we have, the fact that a disease was politicized, and so we don't even have a shared understanding of this virus, right? And that makes things really difficult. We were fortunate. We were remote fall semester. We were fortunate to be back in person spring semester, and so we have had some practice of being together in the midst of all of this business, but most classes were still remote, even though the students were on campus. And so one of the things that I'm thinking about, right, and we're starting to see reports about this around the country, that just, random violence. Just over the weekend, there were 2 incidents, one in Arizona, one, I think perhaps in Florida, people ramming their cars into, one was a bike race and the other was I think a pride event. And there are some experts that are saying we can expect more of this kind of antisocial behavior as people start to emerge from this pandemic, with all of this pent up energy and all the rest of that. And that certainly gives me pause. And I know it gives colleagues pause too, as we think about bringing students back for a more quote unquote normal fall semester, and needing to re-socialize people about what it means to be in community and what it means to live your life in a way that that takes care of and looks after your fellow human being, uh, which is just very different than where we are collectively, I think, right now. So those are the kinds of things that we're thinking about with how we approach orientation. It's sort of a theme for the remarks that I gave to our virtual orientation, or doing that remotely, the summer orientation, but how we'll pick up on those themes when students come back, right? That being a member of a community is a real privilege.
Mhm.
And we, each of us, for the community to be healthy and whole, we have responsibilities to it and to one another. And that feels more remedial humanity than perhaps what we're used to doing with
Mhm.
students. And in some cases, we have traditional aged college population, so their families play a big part in that. And in some cases, we have to have that kind of remedial humanity with the parents as well. So that's the kind of thing that I think about. As excited as I am for the possibility of all of the great things that come with an in-person semester. And a year ago, nobody even used the words in-person semester,
Mhm.
right? Uh, but as excited as I am about all of that, there are also things that, and again, um, also things that we have to think about to intentionally return to one another.
Mhm. It's interesting that you share that. That's very much been a theme of other conversations like this recently, whether it's a small kind of trivial scale with a student conduct matter, or a much bigger and more concerning scale with the random violence that we saw this weekend. I think that idea of how do we reintegrate and how do we teach people to be together and be humans who care about each other uh, is on a lot of people's minds right now, and very much a theme of the work at this point in time. And so I appreciate you sharing that. I know that our time is short, and so we will end the conversation there, and certainly pick back up with our next conversation, and I'm sure really similar themes. But Michelle, thank you so much for your time and energy. I know that you are grappling with this on your campus and as students return, and with your staff, and wish you well with that work.
Well, thank you so much, Katie. And thank you for this opportunity and for opening this conversation for everyone.
Mm.
One of the things really is that none of us is in it alone. We're all dealing with similar kinds of things in one way or another. And so I'm really grateful to you for providing an opportunity for us to lean on one another and our collective wisdom, and building that as we kind of face this next phase together.
Well, I appreciate it, Michelle, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of your summer.
Thank you. You too.